Welcome back to episode 3 of the Epee DLG build. We are going to be finishing up the build in this episode, running the control linkages and wires, installing the control horns, and attaching all of the control surfaces and wings to the plane. Once we get everything attached and set up, I will do some adjustments for manual trimming. So in the last video we finished up getting the battery and electronics installed into the nose, and what we can do here is take a look and review what the changes. So we've installed the servos here. As you can see, we've got the elevator and the 2 aileron servos. We've got the D4R2 receiver depinned and installed with all of the wires neatly tucked in underneath and along the sides of the servos. The antennas are tied into a knot and then fed through the putty hole up here for balancing, and then they are slotted alongside again the servos with all the other wires. The charge port has been installed and the connector connected to keep it powered off. So now we will need to run the control lines through the eyelets here for the ailerons, and the wire will have to run through the eyelet here towards the tail for the elevator. The spring will need to be attached to the elevator mounting block right about here to give a constant pressure on it, so that way we'll be pulling against the spring. The vertical stabilizer will be just glued in place, and we'll place a simple bit of carbon fiber fabric over it, kind of like a band-aid patch, just to keep it secure. Once we've done that, the Epee should be pretty much ready to be trimmed and tossed. So here we go. So the first thing that I'll need to do is embed the control horns into the control surfaces. I'm going to come in about 1 centimeter on each side and do a straight vertical slot, drop the control horn right inside, and epoxy it in place. This will keep it nice and fixed and should have plenty of leverage on either side of the control surface. Before we make any cuts on the ailerons here, it's best to line up the control horns so that the eyelet of the horn is over the hinge line. Then make a perpendicular mark back, and right there is where I will be cutting a slit into the aileron, so that way I can then fix it in place with a little bit of epoxy. We have the control horns test fit, and I'm now going to mix up a little bit of epoxy and then glue them in place with that. Next thing I did was put a small drop of hot glue on here and spread it really thin. This just adds a slight rubbery texture to the surface of the elevator pylon. This way the elevator, or the horizontal control surface here, it can grip that flat spot a little bit better and not wiggle around at all. Then I went ahead and measured 3 millimeters over from the farthest edge of this pylon and came up with the spacing. So now that I have the control horn for the elevator cut in a slot and positioned here, I'm going to go ahead and mix up my epoxy and then epoxy all 3 of my control horns in place. One other adjustment I made was I took some 600 grit sandpaper and just roughed up the layer just below where the horn here is, so that way it can grip a little bit better against the glue. To make threading the control wire a little easier, you can put a little bend or a crease in it and then feed that through. That will allow you to push it all the way down a little bit easier and prevent catching. Once you get it all the way up here, you can reach in there with a pair of tweezers and pull it. And now it's been run the whole length. When sizing the loop, you want it just large enough to fit over the control horn and loop on there, but not so large that it can easily flop off. Once you have it sized correctly, you can pinch this aluminum sleeve and add a drop of CA glue to fix it in place. So here I've crimped about 5 millimeters of the sleeve on there, and I've also added, before I crimped it, I added a drop of thin CA glue just to fix it in place. I've also added a few drops of CA glue to the holes just to tighten up the fixing there to keep any wiggle from occurring. So I finished attaching the elevator control line and the spring here, so that way when I move the elevator, on the other side here, I've done the same thing. I've used the aluminum sleeve to just pinch and added a drop of CA glue to attach. I did end up dropping down just to the first hole since that had plenty of motion and I didn't need the outer hole. To one of the ends, I've clipped some of the music wire, built it into an L shape here, and used the smaller wire for the trap. This can't pass through the eyelet, so I'm going to feed this through, get it attached to the ailerons, get my length down, and then cut the remaining music wire to make the traps at the and make the L-bends and traps at the other end, and then I should be able to slide it all into place. Something you'll want to pay attention to is these rods don't have a lot of flex, so they really do work well when you crisscross them internally. So this one is actually going to be on this servo, and this aileron is going to be on this servo. So it was a bit of a pain getting these linkages connected. I did end up having to shorten this L bend to about 1/4 of an inch long, and that allowed me enough room here because the length of the attachment here was getting in the way of the eyelet. Also, had I known how much flex this was going to cause, I would have sat the control horns probably closer to the center by a few millimeters just to reduce how much strain is going on here, and that would make it just flow a little bit easier. But as it is, it's not going to cause any issues. Okay, and we finally got the control rods connected here. I did need to use a trap on here, otherwise they were the L bends were just popping out, but adding the trap keeps it in place nice. So the final thing to do now is attach the vertical stabilizer and then balance it out with a little bit of putty in the nose. So the control linkages have now been finalized, both for the ailerons and the elevator. And to take a look here real closely, it's just an L bend with a trap and some common sewing thread wrapped around it and CA glued into place. Same thing on the other side, and these traps keep them in place when the aileron servos move. The bars are crisscrossed internally. The elevator is just done using a sleeve that's been crimped with a little CA glue for both front and back. The spring has been CA glued into place with a little bit of spare carbon fiber strip over it just to hold it down, and the tail has had extra carbon fiber cloth added as a little band-aid on both sides. I made up a simple charging cable from a spare plug and a JST connector. This way I can just plug it in and charge it on a 1S setting and it's fine. If you notice that you're not getting power out, you probably have the grounds in the jack and the plane reversed, as all you have to do is swap the ground wires. So if everything's already glued in place, you'll have to cut out the servos, remove all the stuff, cut the ground wires, and switch the connections. That was what happened to me when I noticed I wasn't able to charge my battery. Now that everything's charged up and ready to go, I can remove the power plug right there. Plane automatically turns on. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this build. The whole thing came together pretty well. I took a lot of time researching each part of the build, and that's why these videos took a little while to put out there. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing something totally wrong. At worst, I mismeasured a few things, and I was able to correct it throughout the build or later on after I noticed the error. One thing I would note is make sure you don't go out too wide on your aileron control horns. Make sure you take time measuring out your stuff in your nose pod. Also on your tail section, just take your time. I had to tape down the spring for the elevator so that I could glue it in place. I had to measure up the vertical stabilizer and get that as accurate as I could. Everything came out really well though. I'm very pleased with the build. Beautiful plane, and it comes in at about 134 grams, so it might be a little chubby compared to other builds. However, for my first, I'm not too sad about it. It's likely something to do with all the extra cutting and gluing and material that I had to refuse or redo back in there. So hopefully the next build will come in about the same or maybe even lighter. So with that, everything's been charged up and I'm ready to go fly. Till next time.